My name is Danielle Hargrove. I am 36 years old. And on the 3rd of November, a Wednesday evening at exactly 14 minutes past 7, I was handed a cardboard box and told I had until Friday to be out of the house, not by a stranger, by my mother-in-law, Patricia Whitmore, a woman I had cooked for, laundered for, and quietly made space for in every room I occupied. For 7 years. A woman who sat across from me at that kitchen table, the one I had refinished myself the summer before with a borrowed sander and 2 coats of Danish oil, and said, "You are a drain on this household, Danielle. You always have been. You contribute nothing that matters. You do not work a real job. You have not given my son a family. And frankly, staying here any longer would be doing you a disservice too. My son deserves a woman who adds to his life, not one who takes from it." My husband, Ryan Whitmore, was watching football in the living room 20 feet away. The television was not loud enough to have covered what she said. He did not come in. I did not cry. I did not raise my voice. I did not pick up that cardboard box and throw it at the wall the way some part of me, in another life, might have wanted to. I sat very still with my hands flat on the table and my face arranged into something neutral, and I looked at Patricia's expression. The settled certainty of it, the way a person looks when they have been rehearsing something for a long time and are finally saying it out loud, and I made a decision so quiet it barely registered as a thought. It was more like a door closing, softly, with a click. What they didn't know was that for the previous 16 months I had been building something. A thing they could not see because they had never once trained their eyes on me as someone capable of building anything. They saw a wife, a woman without a career that impressed anyone at dinner parties, a daughter-in-law who smiled too much and had opinions she kept mostly to herself, a problem without a solution. They had absolutely no idea what I had already become. This is that story. To understand the cardboard box moment, you have to understand the house and the family that ran it like a corporation with one CEO and no board. The Whitmore home was a 4-bedroom colonial on Birchwood Lane in Fairfield County, Connecticut. It was the kind of house that photographed beautifully and felt, from the inside, like living inside someone else's carefully maintained opinion of themselves. Original hardwood floors, a wraparound porch with white railings, a kitchen that had been renovated twice in the past decade, each renovation slightly more expensive than the last. Both of them planned and executed by Patricia with the intensity of a military campaign. Patricia Whitmore was 63 years old. She was a retired human resources director from a mid-size insurance company, and she had transferred every professional instinct she had accumulated over 30 years of managing people into the management of her household and her son's life. She was not loud. She was not theatrical. She operated through precision and repetition, the way certain very effective kinds of pressure do, not a single dramatic blow, but a sustained, consistent weight applied over time, until the shape of the thing beneath it changed. She had been a widow for 4 years. Her husband, Gerald Whitmore, had died of a stroke in the spring before Ryan and I married. I had met Gerald once at the engagement dinner. He had shaken my hand with both of his and said, "Welcome to the family, sweetheart." I have thought about that handshake many times since. Her son was Ryan Whitmore, 40 years old, a project manager at a civil infrastructure firm in Stamford, earning $112,000 per year, a number Patricia had found ways to mention in my presence. At family gatherings, no fewer than 9 times over the course of 7 years. I kept count starting from the 3rd time, when I understood it was not pride she was expressing, but positioning. Ryan was handsome and reasonable and capable of great warmth in private. He was also, and this is the truest thing I can say about him, a man who had never developed the muscle for conflict. Not real conflict, the kind where you choose someone and stand there. He had grown up in a house where Patricia's preferences were the weather, and like a person who has spent their whole life in one climate, he had no framework for any other. I had come into the Whitmore world 7 years earlier in the late summer, when Ryan and I had been dating for 14 months and he had asked me to move into the Birchwood Lane house temporarily, while we saved for a place of our own. Temporarily at the time had meant 6 months. It had stretched, in the way that temporary arrangements do when no one has the energy to disrupt them, into 7 years. I was 29 when I moved in. I had a degree in graphic design from the University of Hartford and was working as a senior designer at a boutique branding agency in Westport, earning $68,000 per year. It was not a glamorous income by Fairfield County standards, where the bar was set by finance and law, and Patricia had understood this immediately. She never said it directly in the early months. She expressed it through omission, through the way she introduced me at neighborhood gatherings. Danielle does graphic design, with a slight pause after the word graphic, that managed to communicate, without a single additional syllable, that she found it a hobby dressed up as a profession. The first incident I remember with real clarity happened 8 months after I moved in. I had been asked by my firm to lead a rebrand project for a regional hospital network, the largest project of my career to that point. And I came home one evening in early April elated in the way you are elated when work has gone well and you want someone to know. Ryan was out with colleagues. Patricia was in the kitchen. I told her about the project. She listened. She poured herself a glass of water. And then she said, "That sounds like a lot of late nights. Ryan does like dinner at a reasonable hour." She walked out of the kitchen. I stood there for a moment, and then I began making dinner because I did not yet know what to do with something so specifically shaped to diminish. The second incident came 2 years into the arrangement, at Thanksgiving. Patricia's sister Carol was visiting from Phoenix, along with Carol's daughter, who had recently been promoted to partner at a law firm in Scottsdale at the age of 31. Patricia made sure we all understood this. She referenced it 4 times over the course of the meal. On the 5th reference, she looked at me across the table and said, "It's never too late to go back to school, Danielle. Reinvent yourself. Plenty of women do it after 30. The table went quiet. Ryan said, "Mom," in the tone of a man asking a dog to get off the furniture. Patricia smiled pleasantly and passed the cranberry sauce. The third incident, the one that closed something inside me permanently, came in the spring of the 6th year. Ryan and I had been trying to have a child for 8 months at that point. Not yet a clinical concern, but enough to be emotionally textured. Patricia, who had somehow extracted this information from Ryan without my awareness or consent, announced it at a Sunday lunch with 2 of her friends from her church auxiliary group. Not in explicit terms, in the way she did everything, precise and plausibly deniable. She said, "We are hoping for news soon on the family front. Some things just take longer when a woman gets started late." Her friends nodded. I was 34 at the time. I looked at my plate and cut my chicken into pieces that I did not eat. I had a master's degree in visual communication I had completed online over 2 years while working full-time and managing a household that was not mine. The diploma was in a drawer in the bedroom because when I had shown it to Patricia upon completion, she had said, "Online degrees, well, at least you kept yourself busy." I kept it in the drawer. Here's what I need you to know about me. I am not a person who performs patience. I have it, genuinely, in the way that people who learned early to read a room rather than react to it tend to develop it as a reflex rather than a discipline. But patience is not infinite, and it is not formless. At a certain point, patience becomes something else. It becomes architecture. You stop waiting for the room to change and you start building the door. I started building the door 16 months before the cardboard box. The catalyst was not dramatic. It was a spreadsheet and an overheard phone call and the particular quality of a November afternoon light through a kitchen window. The kind of flat gray Connecticut light that makes everything feel exactly as real as it is. Patricia was on the phone with her friend Beverly in the living room, speaking in the half volume she used when she was not concerned about being overheard, which told me she had not registered. I was home. I had come back early from a client meeting that ended in under an hour, and I was in the kitchen making tea, and the open plan layout of that house, which Patricia had achieved through a renovation 3 years prior by removing a load-bearing wall at some significant expense, meant that sounds traveled freely between rooms. Patricia was describing a property she had seen listed in town, a commercial building on Greenway Avenue, 3 stories, Mixed use, ground floor commercial tenants, 2 upper floors of residential units. The owner was a retired contractor named Dale Hutchins, who was selling as part of a divorce settlement and needed to move quickly. The listing price was $430,000. Patricia had seen it with a realtor friend and was, as she described it to Beverly, absolutely furious that she didn't have the liquidity to move on it. "Beverly," she said, "that building is worth $600,000 in 2 years. The rents alone would cover the mortgage twice over. Dale just wants out. It is a steal, and I am standing here watching it become someone else's windfall." I turned off the burner under the kettle. I set down the mug. I went to the small desk in the corner of the bedroom, and I opened my laptop and I pulled up the county property listings, and I found the listing for the Greenway Avenue building in under 4 minutes. Patricia was right. It was a steal. 3 ground floor commercial spaces, a dry cleaner, an insurance office, and a vacant unit last rented as a nail salon, plus 6 residential apartments on the upper 2 floors, 4 of them currently occupied at rents that were, based on the county assessor data I could access in another 4 minutes, running approximately 30% below market rate. A buyer with any intention of active management could increase the net operating income substantially within 18 months. I had been doing freelance brand consulting on the side for 3 years at that point. Work I invoiced through a single-member LLC I had formed on a Sunday afternoon in my 2nd year in the Whitmore house. For no reason I could have articulated clearly at the time except that my father had always said a woman should have a thing in her own name. That LLC had a business bank account. That account, as of November that year, held $41,000 in retained earnings. My personal savings, accumulated over 7 working years and accounts I had never consolidated with Ryan, because the timing had never felt right in a way I trusted, held another $67,000. My 401k was separate and untouched. Personal liquid savings, $108,000. It was not $430,000. But it was a foundation that a bank would take seriously, particularly if the income history on the property supported the debt service, which it did, and then some. I called my father that evening from the parking lot of a CVS 2 miles from the house, sitting in my car with the heat running. My father, Warren Hargrove, had spent 28 years as a commercial loan officer at a regional bank in Hartford before his retirement. And when I described the property to him and read him the listing details and the assessor data I had saved to my phone, he was quiet for a long time. Then he said, in the voice he reserves for things he has already decided, "Who's your lawyer?" I said, "I don't have one yet." He said, "You'll need a good real estate attorney and a lender who does investment property loans. I know both. Can you come to Hartford this Saturday?" I said, "Yes." He said, "Don't mention this to anyone." I said, "I know, Dad." He said, "I know, Dad." He said, "I mean anyone, Danielle." I said, "I know." We did not need to say anything else. That has always been the best thing about my father. He understands that some conversations are complete the moment they begin. The following Saturday, I told Patricia I was visiting my college roommate Megan in New Haven. This was not entirely false. Megan did live in New Haven. I was not going there. I drove to Hartford, sat in my father's kitchen for 4 hours, and by the time I left, I had the name of a real estate attorney named Stephanie Park at a firm in West Hartford, and the name of a community bank lender my father had worked with for 20 years, who did investment property financing without requiring it to be your primary residence. I met with Stephanie Park the following Thursday on my lunch break. She was 44, efficient, and had the particular quality of calm that good attorneys develop when they have seen enough transactions to know which problems are real and which are noise. She reviewed the listing data I had brought and within 40 minutes had identified 3 title issues to verify, 2 boundary questions in the survey records, and 1 lease discrepancy between what the listing represented and what the actual tenant agreement on the dry cleaner showed. She said, "I'll do a full title search and review the estoppel certificates. Come back in 2 weeks." I said, "How much?" She said, $3,000 for the due diligence phase. We'll talk about the closing work when we get there. I wrote her a check from my business account before I left the office. 16 months. That is how long it took from the CVS parking lot phone call to the cardboard box evening. I want to tell you what those 16 months look like from the inside, because the outside looked, to everyone in the Whitmore house, like nothing at all. From the outside, Danielle was the same, quiet, agreeable, competent at household things, professionally functional in a way that no one in that house had ever been particularly interested in. She made dinner on the weeknights she was home. She attended Patricia's church auxiliary fundraiser in the spring and helped set up the folding tables. She smiled at Ryan's company holiday party in December and made polite conversation with the partners' wives. She was present and pleasant and utterly unremarkable in the way she had learned to be in that house. From the inside, in the month of January, I submitted a formal offer on the Greenway Avenue property through Stephanie at $405,000, with an inspection contingency and a 30-day close. Dale Hutchins's attorney countered at $418,000. We settled at $411,500. I put down $82,075 from personal savings, $7 from the LLC account, and financed the balance through a 15-year investment property loan at a fixed rate of 6.8%, with my father listed as a non-occupant co-bore thrower for qualification purposes. The property closed on the 14th of February. I signed the deed in Stephanie's conference room at 2:30 in the afternoon. She handed me the keys, 2 sets, 1 for each exterior door, and said, "Congratulations, landlord." I drove home. I made pasta. Patricia told me the sauce needed more salt. In the months that followed, I raised the rents on the 4 occupied residential units to market rate, with proper 60-day notice as Connecticut law required, structured to be effective on the 1st of May. 2 tenants renewed, 2 did not, and those units were re-tenanted at market rate within 6 weeks through a property management firm I had retained in February before the close. The vacant commercial unit, the former nail salon, was leased to a small physical therapy practice at a monthly rate that exceeded what the nail salon had paid by $1,100 per month. By September of that year, 8 months after closing, the Greenway Avenue building was generating a net operating income of $6,200 per month after management fees, insurance, and property taxes. The mortgage payment was $2,600. My monthly cash flow, $3,600, arriving in my LLC account on the 1st of every month, from a building that sat 6 blocks from the Whitmore house, that Patricia drove past on her way to the grocery store, and that she had told Beverly she wished she could own. During all of this, I continued to wake up in the Whitmore house every morning. I continued to be polite at dinner. I continued to listen to Patricia's assessments of my limitations. I continued to replace the dish towels when they frayed and to water the front porch planters in the summer and to be, to every observer, a woman who had quietly accepted her place. I had not accepted anything. I was paying attention. I was building. I was counting. If you're still watching, I want to pause here for just a moment and ask you something directly. Has someone in your life ever made a decision about your ceiling, decided on your behalf and without asking exactly how high you were allowed to go? Drop a comment below. Tell me what they said and tell me what you did with it. And if you haven't subscribed to this channel, right now is the moment. Every story we tell here is built on the same quiet truth. The people who underestimate you are also, always, the people who stop watching you, and that is your advantage. Now, back to the Wednesday in November, the cardboard box. It was the 3rd of November, a Wednesday. I know the time precisely because I had been watching the clock in the kitchen since 6:30, aware in the way you are aware when something is about to happen, that particular atmospheric pressure that precedes a change in weather. At 14 minutes past 7, Patricia came into the kitchen where I was cleaning up after dinner, and she said, "Sit down, Danielle. I want to speak with you." She pulled out the chair across from mine and sat, and she folded her hands on the table the way she did when she had organized her thoughts in advance, and she said the things I have already told you. The drain on the household, the nothing that matters, the woman who takes instead of adds. And then she said, "Ryan and I have talked. He agrees this isn't working. We think it's best you go back to your parents for a while. Take some time. Figure out what you actually want. A separation doesn't have to be permanent, but it does need to happen. She reached down beside her chair and placed a flattened cardboard box on the table between us. I kept this from the wine delivery last week, she said. It should be enough for your essentials. I looked at the cardboard box. 12 bottles of Pinot Grigio, Patricia's brand, and then I did something she was not prepared for. I smiled. Not with triumph. Not with theater. I smiled the way you smile when the last piece of an equation resolves, and the answer is cleaner than you expected. All right, Patricia, I said. She blinked. Her hands unclasped slightly. She had anticipated almost anything except agreement, and certainly not agreement delivered with that particular quality of calm. I'll be out by Friday, I said. I picked up the cardboard box. I looked at it for a moment. I won't need this, I said, and set it back on the table. I have my own. I walked upstairs. I sat on the edge of the bed and I sent a text message to Stephanie Park. It said, "It's time to move forward on the next conversation. Can we meet Monday?" She responded in 11 minutes. Monday at 10. I'll have everything ready. Then I sent a text to my father. It said, "It happened. I'm going home Friday." He replied, "Drive safe. Your room's made up." I slept extremely well. I moved out of Birchwood Lane on a Friday afternoon with 3 boxes and 2 suitcases that I loaded into my car alone, because Ryan was at work and Patricia had chosen, with what I recognized as her particular brand of tactical absence, to be at her friend Beverly's house for lunch. As I was carrying the last box to the car, the next-door neighbor, a woman named Claudette, who had always been kind to me, came out onto her porch and said, "Danielle, honey, are you all right?" I said, "I'm wonderful, Claudette. I really am." She looked at me for a moment, and then she said, "You look it." I drove to my parents' house in Hartford with the windows down, even though it was November, because I wanted to feel the air. On the following Tuesday, 11 days after the cardboard box, Patricia Whitmore received a certified letter at her Birchwood Lane address. The letter was from the law offices of Park & Associates in West Hartford. It was written on formal firm letterhead and addressed to her in her capacity as a party of interest in a property matter concerning the building at Greenway Avenue in Fairfield County. The letter informed her that the referenced property had been purchased and registered in the name of Danielle Hargrove, sole owner, in February of the current year. It further noted that in the course of the new owner's ongoing review of property records, a question had arisen regarding a historic easement document from 1988 that referenced the Birchwood Lane property and the Greenway Avenue parcel in connection with a shared utility access arrangement from when the parcels had been under common ownership before subdivision. The letter indicated that the new property owner was seeking clarification on the current status of this arrangement and requested a response through legal counsel within 30 days. I want to be honest about the easement. Stephanie had found it in the title records, a genuine document, genuine history, a genuine open question that had never been formally resolved when the lots were subdivided in the early 90s. It was not a strong claim. It was never going to result in any action against the Birchwood Lane property. But it was real, it was documented, and it was enough to put Patricia in a room with a lawyer, looking at paperwork that had my name on it, in the context of a building she had told Beverly she wished she could own. Patricia called Ryan the same afternoon the letter arrived. I know this because Ryan called me. For the first time since I had left Birchwood Lane, he called at 4:17 in the afternoon on a Tuesday, and when I answered he said, "Danielle, the Greenway building, did you buy it?" I said, "Yes." Silence. Then, when? I said, "February, about 10 months ago." More silence. Then, in a voice that I had not heard from him before, quieter than his usual register, with something in it that might have been the beginning of understanding, he said, "You've been there this whole time." It was not a question. I said, "Yes." I let the quiet sit. Then I said, "Ryan, I have to go. Talk to your lawyer." He said, "Danielle." I said, "Good night," and I ended the call. The formal meeting was scheduled for the 20th of November, a Tuesday, at 10:30 in the morning, at Stephanie's offices in West Hartford. Patricia was present. Her attorney, a man named Gerald Foster who specialized in estate and property matters, was present. Ryan was present. My father was present. Stephanie was present. And I was present. I wore a charcoal blazer and my hair up. I had slept 8 hours and had oatmeal and coffee before I left my parents' house. I arrived 6 minutes early and chose the chair at the corner of the conference table that put the window light at my back. When Patricia walked in and saw me seated at that table, she stopped. Not for long. A beat. A single beat, the way a metronome hesitates before it resumes. Then she sat down and her face rearranged itself into the composed expression I knew well, and she looked at the table rather than at me. Ryan sat down without meeting my eyes. Stephanie opened the meeting, introduced the parties, and then presented the documentation package. Deed of purchase, February. Mortgage agreement. Executed lease agreements. All current tenants. Certificate of occupancy for the newly leased commercial unit. Monthly income statements from the property management firm. And on the final page, the independent appraisal commissioned in October, which assessed the current market value of the Greenway Avenue building at $580,000. The room was completely quiet when Gerald Foster turned to that page. Patricia was looking at the appraisal document. I watched her look at it. I watched her read the address. I watched her read the number, and I watched something happen in her face that I had never seen there in 7 years. The settled certainty went out of it, the way a light goes out. What replaced it was smaller and undefended, and very much less comfortable for her. This is... She stopped. She started again. You purchased this building, Stephanie said. My client purchased the Greenway Avenue property in February of this year, as the documentation reflects. Patricia looked at me directly for the first time since entering the room. You bought Dale Hutchins's building, she said. I said, yes. You were living in my house. I was. You were living in my house, and you were. She stopped again. Her attorney put a hand briefly on her arm. I did not speak. I had learned, over 7 years in her company, that the most powerful response to a Patricia Whitmore sentence was the space after it. My father, who had not said a word to that point, leaned forward very slightly and said, in the unhurried voice of a man who has spent decades in rooms where money and dignity are both on the table, my daughter has been building her future for a long time, Patricia. She's been doing it quietly, the way capable people do. He leaned back. He did not say anything else. Gerald Foster and Stephanie proceeded to discuss the easement documentation in appropriate legal terms. The discussion was professional and thorough. The conclusion, which both attorneys had understood before they walked into the room, was that the easement question was historically documented but practically unresolved, and that both parties' interests were best served by a formal acknowledgement that the arrangement had no current operational effect, executed in writing and filed with the county. This would take approximately 60 days to complete. The meeting adjourned at 12:14, 99 minutes. As people gathered their documents, Patricia came around the table toward me. She moved slowly, without her usual purposefulness, and she looked smaller than I remembered her looking, which was not something I had expected to feel anything about, but I noticed that I felt something about it anyway. She stopped a few feet from me and she said in a voice that had lost all its architecture, Danielle, I think we should talk. Without lawyers. I looked at her. I thought about the sauce needing more salt. I thought about the Thanksgiving cranberry sauce. I thought about the online degree being at least useful for keeping busy. I thought about 7 years of dinners at a table that was never quite mine. Patricia, I said, I think everything that needs to be said has been documented very clearly today. I hope you and Ryan are well. I picked up my portfolio and I said goodbye to Gerald Foster, who shook my hand with what appeared to be genuine respect, and I walked out of the offices with Stephanie and my father into the November air. My father and I drove to a diner on Farmington Avenue and had lunch. He ordered the Turkey Club. I ordered the same. We sat in a booth with the afternoon light coming through the window and he said after a little while, Your mother wants to know if you'll come for Thanksgiving this year. I said, I wouldn't miss it. He said, "Good." We ate our sandwiches. That was enough. There are things that take time to understand about yourself, and one of them is the difference between what you survive and what you become because of what you survive. I have been thinking about this distinction for the months since November, in the evenings in the apartment I moved into on the 1st of December, in the south-facing unit on the second floor of my own building on Greenway Avenue, which I furnished over 3 weekends with pieces I chose entirely by myself. A blue velvet sofa, a drafting table by the window, a shelf where the master's degree diploma now hangs in a frame I bought at a gallery on Chapel Street in New Haven. I think about what Patricia believed she was doing when she handed me that cardboard box. She believed she was performing clarity, cutting through a situation that had failed to resolve itself on its own. She had identified me as the variable that wasn't working, and she had moved to eliminate it. This made complete sense within her framework, because her framework had never included the possibility that I was the kind of variable that was also, simultaneously, doing something else entirely. She had watched me for 7 years, and she had seen exactly what she expected to see. Because she had decided in the first months what I was, and had observed everything since then through that decision. She was not stupid. She was a woman who was very, very good at reading the rooms she had already furnished. She was not prepared for a room I had built without her. I do not carry bitterness about this. I want to be clear about that, because I think bitterness is often what people expect from a story like this one, and I think it is one of the less interesting options available. What I carry is something more like information, about what it means to be seen, about the difference between being seen and being observed, about the quiet mathematics of building something in the hours and the spaces that other people have written off as empty. Ryan and I finalized our separation through our respective attorneys. There were no fireworks. There was paperwork, and there was the quiet sadness that comes with the end of something that might have been different under different conditions, with different people, making different choices. I wish Ryan well. I genuinely do. He is a man who never learned to choose, and that is its own kind of imprisonment, and I would not trade places with him for anything. Patricia, I understand, has taken on a part-time consulting role with an HR firm in Greenwich. The Birchwood Lane house is on the market. Life reorganizes itself. What I know now, but I could not have put into words during those 7 years, is this. When you are in a room that has been designed without a door for you, you have 2 choices. You can spend your time trying to convince the room to open, or you can go find your materials and build somewhere else. I built somewhere else. I built it while living in the room that had no door for me, which is the part that took the most patience and the most stillness and the most trust in arithmetic. $3,600 per month, arriving without drama or announcement, from a building 6 blocks away. From tenants who did not know my name for the first 6 months. From a deal that made sense on the spreadsheet before it made sense in my life. I started before I was ready. I moved when the window opened. I kept going when it was quiet and when it was hard, and when Patricia told me the sauce needed more salt, and I said, "Yes, you're right." And I went back to my office that evening and sent 3 client invoices and made a supplementary principal payment on the mortgage. The building on Greenway Avenue is full now. All 3 commercial spaces, all 6 residential units. The dry cleaner has been there for 11 years. The physical therapy practice hung a small sign in their window last month that says, "Voted best new practice in the county." My property manager sends me a statement on the 1st of every month. I read it, with coffee on the blue velvet sofa, with the south light coming through the window over my drafting table, and the diploma visible on its shelf. It is a good building. I built it in silence, and it is entirely, irreversibly mine. If you are in a room right now where someone has decided what you are worth, and you have not been able to say yet what you know to be true, I am not going to tell you to fight. I am not going to tell you to confront. I am going to say, find your spreadsheet. Find your quiet hour. Find the one thing that only you can see from where you are standing and begin. The loudest comebacks are built in silence. I know this because I built one. In the gap between who they decided I was and who I already knew myself to be. There was enough room for a building, What they didn't know could not stop me, and what they don't know about you cannot stop you either. What are you building right now that the wrong people in your life have no idea exists? Tell me in the comments. I want to know. Before you go, we are 3 people who show up every day to do this work, because we believe that the stories told the quietest deserve the biggest audience. Every story on this channel is built with care and brought to life through AI narration, and we are grateful from the ground up for every person watching. These stories find the people who need them. If this one found you, subscribe. We release a new story every single day on Revenge Chronicles, and the next one is already waiting. What is the one thing you have been building in silence? The thing that would change the whole picture for the people who think they know your story?